Okay, everyone. Good evening. As you can see, it's a little bit of a different setting. I'm at home now. Not on shul either. But nevertheless, it's the class Monday night. A little later than usual, but it wasn't coming together for me till now. And even now, we'll see. The Eberster Telfen. Hashem will help that everything will go with Hatzlacha and the class will work out. Okay. L'chaim. Today's class, I'd like to talk about the big Yom Tov that's coming, Abba Leinu L'Tova, tomorrow night. Tonight is Yud Daled Av, and we're heading towards the night of Tezvav B'Av, which is going to be tomorrow night on Wednesday. Chamishasar B'Av. Some people refer to it as Tu B'Av. It's a big Yom Tov, as the sages say to us, that the Jewish people didn't have any Yom Tovim. In Gemara Masechtas Tainus, all the way in the end of Masechtas Tainus, talks about the awesome Yom Tov of the 15th of Av, that the Jewish people never had Yom Tov as great as the 15th of Av. Now, the 15th of Av is a Yom Tov, and like Yom Kippur. These were the two greatest Yom Tovim. And so in Kabbalah, the Gemara gives its reasons why. The Gemara gives 7 reasons for the reason of the celebration of the 15th of Av. We're not going to go into it now. Mystically, the greatness of the Yom Tov of the 15th of Av is that it's associated with the being that it's the 15th day of the month, and the 15th day of the month is the moon is in its completion. The Shleimus Halavana, the moon is a full moon, and we know that Knesset Yisroel, we know the Jewish people are compared to the moon, and we also know that Malchus based David, the family of Mashiach, the dynasty of Mashiach, the Davidic dynasty, which we're all waiting for, is in its full power, is compared to the moon, and so when the moon is in its completion, sorry, I don't know why we got upgehakt. Okay. So when the moon is in its shleimus, it represents a shleimus both in the Jewish people and a shleimus also in the Messianic process. That the powers of Mashiach, the power of the Geula, is in its full might and its full strength. That's why it says that on the 15th of Av is Meir, it is illuminating the Giluyim, the revelations of the future. So it's the closest day in the year. Probably there's 2-3 days, I would say. Achron Shel Pesach is Meir Ha'oros Mashiach. The 8th day of Pesach is the day that Mashiach's energy is very strong in the world. And the 15th of Av, probably the 2 closest days, most intense days, Tisha B'Av itself. But really, the 15th of Av is really connected to Tisha B'Av in that the 15th of Av is what reveals the pnimius of Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av itself is really a Mashiach the Gedei. The only reason Hashem that we brought the last series of classes, on the Monday classes, when we spoke about time, the nature of time being timeless, we brought what the Medrash says, that the whole destruction of the first base of Mikdash and the second base of Mikdash was that Allah Aryeh, the lion, went up in the month of Av and destroyed the base of Mikdash on purpose, and the reason for the destruction was Amanas, for the purpose of building the third base of Mikdash. So that means it was a demolition for the sake of a construction. Demolition, so that means so what is really Tisha B'Av? Tisha B'Av is really the beginning of the construction. It's laying the cornerstone. It's like also we learned from the story of Rabbi Akiva, when he saw the fox come out, he was laughing. Why was he laughing? Because he saw already the prophecies of the future. And as the Rebbe explained, what he saw was that Tzion Sada Techaresh, he was able to see that the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was an act of plowing. When you see someone plowing a field, you don't comfort this person and console him for the destruction of his plowing. You don't even tell him that, because of the construction, because of the plowing and the destruction of it, eventually, something good is going to come out of it. It's going to be a plowed field and something is going to grow. You realize from the beginning that the reason he's plowing his field is because he's really beginning the new crop. Hashem is beginning the new crop. And when does he begin it? On Tisha B'Av. But on Tisha B'Av, things are not seen, things are concealed. On the 15th of Av, things come to revelation, things are revealed. And then we look back at Tisha B'Av and we appreciate that Tisha B'Av really Mashiach is born. The birth of Mashiach Tzidkenu is on Tisha B'Av. As the sages also tell us the story how the cow made a noise, and the Arab told the guy that he should stop plow, he should undo the plow, because there's no reason for Jews to plow the land of Israel, because you're leaving. The exile is beginning, Beis Mikdash was destroyed. And then he heard the cow make the noise a second time, and he said, okay, you can put back on the plow, because just a few seconds later, because Mashiach was born. So really that happens Tisha B'Av already. But on the 15th of Av is when it's revealed. So that tells you the same idea as I mentioned before, that the three most Mashiach days that we have are Achar Pesach, Tisha B'Av, and the 15th of Av. This doesn't get higher in terms of the Geula, the future redemption. I'm referring to biblical days. Then there are days that are related to events that happened in later generations, which are just of significance, like Yud Aleph Nisan, the Rebbe's birthday, things like this. I'm not talking about that. Yud Beis Tammuz, Gimel Tammuz, and these are all fascinating days, and the days, and Chayel, the birth of the Baal Shem Tov, these are all very powerful Messianic days. But I'm talking about days that go, the Tu B'Av is not biblical, but the truth is it has already its origins in biblical times, which also illustrates the same idea that I mentioned before, that Tezvav B'Av is really a revelation of what happens on Tisha B'Av. Because the initial reason the Gemara gives of why the 15th of Av is a Yom Tiv is because it's a day that the Meisei Midbar stopped to die. The Meisei Midbar are the decree, after the sin of the spies, God decreed that the whole generation would die. Whoever was 20 years old and over. So what would happen is, every year, all those people that no one died before they reached the age of 60. So everybody that was in their 60th year would dig a grave for themselves. If you think about the horror of tens of thousands of people, it's horrible. Digging graves for themselves because they're assuming that they'll die. And then the next day, they announced that the living separate from the dead. And this went on year after year, until the last year, when the last people went inside that grave, and then they didn't die. They went on Tisha B'Av by night, and they didn't die. Because also, besides no one dying before 60, no one died any other day but on Tisha B'Av night. That was the Nebuch, the day of mourning, the day of sadness, the day of the opposite of life. And what happened was that they went in and everybody came out. And the next day they went in again because they thought they might have made a mistake in the calendar. They kept on doing this for 6 days until the 9th of the night of Tu B'Av. They saw the night of Chamishas B'Av, 15th of Av. They saw a full moon, and they said, "Hey, if there's a full moon, it's for sure already mid-month." So again, what do you see? The 15th of Av revealed that the decree was over already on Tisha B'Av, but we didn't know it on Tisha B'Av. It was only revealed. It has to do with the concept of the 15th of the month, because the 15th of the month is all about revelation. Because think about it, what happens on the 15th day of the month? You have a full moon. And what does it mean, a full moon? Full moon doesn't mean that the moon is bigger. The moon changes. The same rock. The moon is a rock in the sky, and it has no fluctuation. Its revelation to us, depending on its reflection of the sunlight, is different. And the 15th, the full moon is revealed to us. So the whole idea of the 15th of Av is revelation. Revelation of what? Revelation of the Jewish people, our light. And when a Jew is not being Jewish, or when a Jew is not learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, or fulfilling his or her mission in this world, they're just as Jewish, they're just as holy, they're just as godly. But that godliness is not visible to the outside. It's not even visible to themselves. It's hidden, it's concealed. And that means the moon is not shining. And the idea of the 15th of the month is that the Jew is shining, the Jewish people as a whole, and every individual Jew. Same is also with Mashiach, with the Davidic kingdom. The Malchus based David was never disrupted. The kingdom of David HaMelech, of the kingship of David, never ceased. it's continuing. And as the pasuk says, already to Yaakov, if you know Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, Machlekes mi bein Raglov, there will never depart a ruler from the house of Yehuda. That means there's always a king, a melech mi beis David that always exists amongst the Jewish people. A fascinating discussion on that is one of my real favorite Sfarim on Mashiach, in Yonei Shel Mashiach. In that sefer, he discusses this at great length. This amazing idea how there's the first of all, I mean, the Shlach Kaddish says it, and others say it, but that there's always a Melech mi beis David. It's just that sometimes it's not visible. The Jews don't know about it, and that's the Mashiach. But in the end of days, Yamid Melech, as the Rambam says, the king will appear. That's Gilui Halavana, revelation of Rambam. And that's why Tisha B'Av is such a crucial Yom Tov for us today, because as I mentioned many times, the power of Mashiach and Mashiach Tzidkenu, in essence, was already revealed also, but not in a revelation that everybody recognizes. It's a more concealed and obscure revelation. And the revelation that we're waiting for is a revelation for everybody to realize that he's a full manifest revelation. And that revelation is something that is related to Tisha B'Av. It's a very powerful day. What I'd like to do today is get into the mystical ideas of this Yom Tov. What's the significance of the 15th of Dafka? So in Kriyat Chaim, as I mentioned earlier, it mentions that the Maila of the day is that it's the 15th. But on that, the question is I asked it in classes in the past as well. I mean, the 15th of the month is not the Dafka in Av. The 15th of the month is a reoccurrence that happens 12 times in the year, and sometimes 13 if we have a leap year. So what is the significance Dafka of the 15th, Dafka the 15th of Av? So being that the Shleimus of the Levana, the Milya Levana, the filling of the moon, is because the moon has a chisarim, the moon has a lacking, the moon has a pegimas al-Levana, what's called pegimas, the blemish of the moon. That means that the moon's light is inconsistent, that there is a waxing and a waning of the moon, and the whole waxing of the moon, till it's in its full light, is related to the waning of the light of the moon, the fact that the moonlight disappears. So it is for that reason that the fullness of the moon and the greatness of it is dependent on its diminishment. The greater the moon's diminishment, the greater is its light. So physically, we don't see in the moon that in the summer, in the month of August, during this time, during the month of Av, that we should see a brighter light on the 15th day of Av than any other night, than any other 15th of a month. We don't see it physically. But spiritually, the moon, the light of the Shekhinah, the light of Malchus, the light of the Jewish people, the light of Malchus Beis David, is much, much brighter on the 15th of Av than it is in any other of the 15th. And that is because since in the month of Av, there is the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and the beginning of the Golus of the Jewish people. That means Nafla Teres Rishenu, the crown of the Jewish people, the crown jewel of the Beis Hamikdash, and the shattering of Malchus Beis David, and the Jewish people's power in the world has been shattered and broken and diminished and shamed and desecrated and so on and so forth, all related to the fall which happens in the beginning of the month of Av, in the 9 days. Starts already in Tammuz, but continues in the month of Av. It's for that reason that the comeback that happens in the month of Av is a greater comeback than in any other month. And that's why the Yom Tov of the 15th of Av is greater than the 15th of every other month. The 15th always represents a special. That's why we have Yom Tovim that happen on the 15th. The two out of the Shalish Regalim take place on the 15th of the month, the 15th of Sukkot. Sukkot is the 15th of Tishrei, the 7th month. Nisan is the 15th of Pesach is the 15th of Nisan, which is the first month. And we wait after for the 15th, because the 15th represents Shleimus of the Jewish people. Time on the moon is the closest to the sun, which represents the Jewish people, the closest to God. And God's light is visibly being reflected from Hashem to us and from us to the world. That is every time. And also Purim. even though Purim, the Yom Tov is, now Shavuos is different. Shavuos happens, but Shavuos is not dependent on the day of the month. Shavuos is Shavuos is almost like the second days of Pesach. Pesach is the beginning, Shavuos is the conclusion. So Shavuos we don't count. But the other big Yom Tov, Pesach and Sukkot, is the 15th. And Purim as well, which Purim is the 14th, not the 15th. But we know that in Purim itself, there's 2 days for Purim. The 2 days for Purim are the 14th and the 15th, because unwalled cities, make it on the 14th. But walled cities, similar to Shushan, make it on the 15th. Why on the 15th? And we know that the Purim of the 15th, like Yerushalayim, is a Shushan, what we call Shushan Purim, is really a greater Purim. That means the godly light of the day, the revelation, the power of the day is greater when it's on the 15th than when it's on the 14th. It's only that in places that are not walled and so on and so forth, they can't accomplish that great revelation. So we do it on the 14th. And why on the 15th? Because it's the 15th. 15th is Shleimus Halavana. And that's, by the way, the reason why it's connected. Who celebrates Purim on the 15th of the month? It's only cities that were walled from the days of Yehoshua ben Nun. And what's the relationship? Yehoshua ben Nun is way before the story of Purim. It should be the cities that were walled in the days of Mordechai and Esther, in the days of Shushan. Why do we count it? So the Gemara says, because we want to give honor to Eretz Yisroel, and there were many cities that in Eretz Yisroel that were destroyed and their walls were not there. So we don't count based on the walls of the days of Shushan. We count from Yeshua ben Nun. Okay, but then why Dafki Yeshua ben Nun? Because that's when we begin Eretz Yisrael to be in Jewish hands. There must be a deeper reason. And the answer is, since the 15, the Maila of the 15 is that the 15 is Shleima Salavana, that there is a completion in the moon. And we know that Yeshua ben Nun, Pnei Yeshua, Pnei Lavana. Yeshua represents the moon. Just like King David represents the moon, the Malchus based David, Yeshua ben Nun is his power, is the power, his Inyan. The Gemara says the Gemara does a comparison between Yeshua and Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara says like this: Moshe Rabbeinu's face was like the face of the sun, and Yeshua ben Nun's face is the face like the moon. But here you see Yeshua is connected to Malchus and to the moon. And that's why we dafka go in the Maila of the 15th, we make it in accordance to Yeshua. Because Yeshua is the Levana. Okay, so that's the Maila again, the 15th of whenever that there's many Yom Tovim on the 15th. But the greatest of them, there's none other. Even though we have other Yom Tovim which are on the 15th, but the greatest one is Dafka, the 15th of Av. Why? Because since it's related to the full moon of the moon, which comes after the disappearance of the moon, the greater the fall, the greater the light. The greater is the building, the greater is the growth. Now, what is the significance? To take this a step deeper, the concept of the 15. What is the inner idea of the Shleimus Halavana? That the moon is in a state of Shleimus, and why does the Shleimus Halavana of the 15th connect to, as we said before, the future? It's a future. It's resembling the ultimate Tikkun on the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, which is only going to happen in the third Beis HaMikdash. How is that connected to the idea of the number 15? So just on a simple level, the Shleimus Halavana represents the moon receiving the sun and the moon are a couple, and the sun is the man, and the moon is the woman, and our relationship with God, Hashem is the sun, and we're the moon. A full moon means that we are receiving our full light. Hashem's light is fully being absorbed upon us. That yichud, is going to reach its perfected state only when Mashiach comes. Because we know that when we went to Har Sinai, it was considered a marriage. God and the Jewish people got married at Sinai. We learned out all the laws of chuppah and marriage, a lot of them from Har Sinai. But it says that by Har Sinai, it was only the betrothal. It was only what's called the first stage of marriage, called erusin. Erusin is when the husband gives the wife, the groom gives the bride a ring, and he's mekadesher. It means he says that you are hereby betrothed to me. Halachically, they become full-fledged husband and wife, but they're still forbidden to live together. And then later, they come to the second stages. They go under the chuppah and they make sheva brachas. They say the 7 blessings under the chuppah. In times of past, it used to be done in 2 separate ceremonies with a significant amount of time in between. Later, the sages changed that and they said that we should make everything together. We shouldn't divide it. But it was initially, that's what used to be done. So in our relationship with Hashem, it says that up till now, we're still in the betrothed state. We have not yet consummated our marriage. We haven't yet completed it. The completion of this yichud, of this union, is only going to be when Mashiach comes. So that's when the moon is receiving the full light of the sun, 15th of the month. But it has to be deeper than that. Because the pasuk says, "V'hoya oir halavana ka'oir hacham." When the moon is receiving the full light of the sun, it's still not as bright as the sun. It's less than the sun. It's receiving the light of the sun, but it's still less than the sun. But there is a nevuah that says that when Mashiach will come, the moon is going to ascend and it's going to be as bright as the sun. Even though there it says that the oir hacham is going to be even brighter, but the moon is going to be uplifted to the brightness of the sun. Where is that hinted to, and where do we see that in the 15th of the month? How is that reflected in number 15 and in the 15th of Av? So the idea is like this. We know that Kabbalistically, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Tetragrammaton, is a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. Okay, so the 4 letters, Yud Kei Vav Kei. The Yud Kei. Now, why the 4 letters? What does this mean? So we know it represents the entire configuration of all the sfirot, of all the attributes. There are 10 attributes, Eser spheros. The Yud and the Hey represent Chachma and Bina, which are the first 2 of the attributes. And the Vav and the Hey represent 6 emotions. The Vav is the 6 emotions. Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. And the latter Hey is significant, is indicative of Malchus, or symbolizes Malchus, the Shechina, the final sphere. Now, the way this operates is that the Yud and the Vav are both masculine spheres. They're both mashpia, influencers. The 2 Heys of Hashem's name, there's 2 Heys, are both recipients. Nukva, feminine. There is a higher Hey, which is Bina, and there's a lower Hey, which is Malchus. Sometimes it's referred to Ke'ima Kebita, like mother, like daughter. This is mother and daughter, because Chachma and Bina are called father and mother, and the lower 2 are called son and daughter, which are also a couple, Za and Malchus. So the upper union, the higher union, is called Yud Kei, is represented in the yichud, in the unity of the Yud and the Hey. As the 2 of them converge together, there is a unity, and that's Yud Kei. The lower unity is considered Vav Kei. The lower unity is hinted to in the Vav and the Hey, when the Vav and the Hey are together. So there's Yud Kei and there's Vav Kei. But we know there's a difference between these, and if we understand a little bit more the deeper meaning of this, when you have Yud Kei, Vav Kei, means there's a perfect, uninterrupted flow of godly light into the world. the worlds are all derivatives and the consequence or dependent on Malchus. Malchus is the power of God that's within creation. It's the final of the 10 attributes. It represents Hashem already completing a series of stages of adjustments to acclimate and to adjust his otherwise infinite energy to be able to be tolerated, for the world to be able to tolerate it. So it has to go through all the filters and the screens until Malchus, and from Malchus it can enter into the spiritual universe and then finally into the physical world. So all hashpa, again, is dependent on everything, on first being received in Malchus, and all hashpa means influence. It has to first be received in Malchus, and from Malchus is the mother of creation, goes into the world. But in order for it to go to Malchus, it comes from the husband of Malchus called the six spheres, sometimes referred to as a Kodesh Baruch Hu. That is Mashpia, the energy into the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the source of the creation. That's the Vav and the He. Higher than that is the Yud and the He, Chachma and Bina. Chachma and Bina is a level of divine transmission, of godly presentation, so to speak, but on an infinitely way above the Vav and the He. It's still higher and beyond, and not yet ready for it to descend, for it to be transmitted into the creation. That is the Yud K. The idea, so a perfect, when things are the way they should be, it flows from the Ein Sof, which is not hinted to in any letter, because Hashem himself can't be the Ein Sof, is unsymbolizable, because there's nothing that we can say that characterizes him. Chachma is already a characteristic, it's already a specific. On the Eibishter, on Hashem himself, there's no specifics. So that's still beyond. And then from him, from the Or Ein Sof, it flows into the first Mashpia, which is Chachma. And Chachma transmits it to Bina. That's the Yud giving it to the He. And then from the He, it comes down to the Vav. And the Vav is then Mashpia to the latter He. These are the two couples, Yud K, Vav K. Now there's a big difference between the flow from the Yud to the He and the flow from the Vav to the He. The difference between them is as follows. The Yud to the He is never interrupted. The Yud and the He always are connected to each other. They're called Terei Nereyin, the Loy Misparshin. They're two friends that never separate. So there's never Chas v'Shalom a disconnect between the Yud and the He. If there would be a disconnect, poof, there would be no existence, no creation at all. So these two, it's like a plug that's always plugged in. It's never, ever, it never blows a fuse. It's never disconnected. The power is always being transmitted. However, the Vav to the He is not always connected. Their Zivug is Leprakim. Sometimes they're unified, sometimes they're not. And even when they're not, there's still a flow coming down to the creation, even though there's no Yichud. How that works is a good question. But obviously, the life force in the world and so on and so forth is severely diminished, and especially godly revelation, when there is no Yichud. In general, the time of Golus is a time that the Zohar calls Itza Hisrachkis Mebaila, that of the woman, the Shekhinah, became distant from her husband. There's no Yichud. That means that's the idea, Shekhinah to the Golus, so the Shekhinah goes to Golus. That's the problem in Golus, is that there is a disconnect between the Vav and the He. That's why we know when we have to do tshuva. The Zohar says that tshuva, the pirush of tshuva is tashuv He, bring the bride back to the groom, bring the wife back to her husband, bring the Jewish people back to Eretz Yisroel. Can reconnect that yichud, that it should flow Yud K, Vav K, should. That is one difference. It's very important over here to pay attention. The two differences, I'm going to explain two differences that there is between the Yud K and the Vav K. One difference is that the Yud K is constant and the Vav K is not necessarily constant. The second difference between the Yud K and the Vav K is that the Yud K, there cannot be, it's a what are they called? A closed circuit. And therefore there can't be any leaking. From a closed circuit communication, there can't be any leakage. It's very private, and therefore there's no unikas achitzonim. The extraneous forces, the bad guys, forces of darkness and evil cannot hack. It's not hackable. It's sometimes you call it on a protected server. So it's a locked server. It's like a Wi-Fi that has a lock, closed. You can't access it. That's Bina, and that's why Bina is a protected zone. No one can be the Chitzonim, can't hack that place. The Vav K is hackable, and that's why Golus means two things. They're both related to this idea. Golus means number one, those who are supposed to be receiving the flow are not receiving. The pipelines are drying up. The Vav is not giving to the Hey. There is a disconnect. There's a lack of communication. There's a lack of divine flow into that which is holy. That's problem number one. Problem number two is that the little bit that is flowing is sometimes polluted. That means the powers of klipa, powers of the unholy, are able to usurp that energy and take it for negativity. And they become very strong. That's what happens in Golas. The powers of evil, the powers of darkness are strengthened, are empowered, and they then abuse that which is holy. They abuse the Jewish people. They abuse the Shekhinah. They abuse everything godly in this world and use this divine power for something bad. That's the idea of exile. So, and one is connected to the other. The reason why the Vav is not giving to the Hey is because when it sees that the Hey is hacked, and whatever it's going to give the Hey is going to be stolen to the wrong people, it doesn't want to make a deposit, it doesn't want to give, because it knows it's going to be robbed. So these are things that all work together. But that's the idea. In the Vav K is susceptible to a hack, to a spiritual hack. In the Yud K, that's not going to happen. But here is the Chiddush of the days of Mashiach. When Mashiach is going to come, it says that Maayon on that day, Yiyeh Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. On that day, we say it in the end of Aleinu, right? The song, Vayoyim Yiyeh Hashem Echad. What's the emphasis of Yiyeh? Yiyeh says that when Mashiach will come, the problem will be fixed. And it will be fixed so well that it can never ever be broken again. What's going to happen? The name of God is going to be Yiyeh. Instead of Yud K, Vav K, it's going to be Yud K. Twice Yud K. What does that mean? That the Malchus and the Ze'er Anpin and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Shekhinah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, their union is going to be on the same level as the union of Chachma and Bina. And when the Vav K, when Ze'er Anpin and Malchus are their union is going to be as great as the Yichud of Chachma and Bina, you're going to gain both benefits. Benefit number one is that the unity is going to be constant. And that's why the consequential third temple, the Beis HaMikdash, is going to be a permanent Beis HaMikdash. It's going to be unbreakable. It's going to last forever. Why? Because there's never a separation. So therefore, the Hashem and the Jewish people are always together. The Shekhinah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are always unified. The flow of divinity in a revealed, open, conspicuous way is going to be consistent and continuous, never ever to be disconnected. Number one. Number two, in the Yud K, there's no unikas achitzonim. There's no hacking. So the koiches of Klippa are going to lose all their power. That's why we know the Yetzer Hara is going to die when Mashiach comes. No more Yetzer Hara. Satan is going to suffocate. No more Varsuach Atuma Avim and Haaretz, the spirit of impurity. Because the whole power of Klippa is it robs. It takes from kedusha. But once kedusha is not leaking anymore, the leak is going to be closed. So there's no more power going out of the circuit, going out of the pipes, out of where it's supposed to be. It's going to be completely protected. Because it's going to be Bayayim Mahu Yeh. Yudke Yavke. That's the secret of the 15th of the month. The idea of the 15th of the month. Month, we said earlier, related to the moon. Moon is Malchus. So it's the lower hay. Now, usually the lower hay, its connection is to the Vav in a manner which is called Vavke, which the Vavke is Gematria 11. But when Mashiach will come, the lower hay is going to have the same union with the Mashpia like the upper hay. The higher hay and the lower hay are going to be perfectly aligned. The same union that there is in the higher hay, same level of attachment, is also going to be in the lower hay. That means the moon is going to be another. Why? Because the Mashpia is going to be not like a Vav. The Mashpia is going to be like a Yud. The difference between a Vav and a Yud is Yud means very potent. Vav means already watered down. A Yud and a Vav is the same letter. A Yud is just point, and the Vav is low. When it lowers it down, it weakens. But when it's not diffused, when it's in its full potency like the Yud. So what that means, that the whole system is going to be elevated. That the Ze'er Anpin and Malchus are going to be in the same level as Chachma and Bina. And as a result of that, the union is going to be inseparable. And again, there's no Unikas Achitzainim. And that's the meaning of the 15th of the month, is that we're emphasizing 15, which is the gematria of Yud K. 15 is Yud and K. Hey is 5 and Yud is 10. So 15 is Yud K. But we're in the moon. That the moon, which is Malchus, the lower Hey, is going to be on the level of 15, on the level of Yud K. And as a result of that, no more break. It's the concept that Yerushalayim Shalmata, the lower Jerusalem, is going to be on the same level like Yerushalayim Shalmaila, like the upper Jerusalem. The Beis Hamikdash, the Lamata. What's the difference between the lower Beis Hamikdash and the higher Beis Hamikdash? The lower Beis Hamikdash is the lower hay, and the Yerushalayim Shalmaila is the upper hay. Now there's a difference between them. When Mashiach comes, they're going to be on the same level, the lower Beis Hamikdash. This is the meaning of Bayayim Mahu Yeh, Yud K, Yud K. Now, what's the cause? So now we understand, and this is Be'ikr, again, this is primarily emphasized in the 15th of Av, more than any other time. Why? Because just like and it's related to what I said before, but just to add another knach, another point to it. Just like when a person does a blemish, the tikkun needs to be in the very same place where the blemish happened. The Gemara says, how do you do tshuva? The Gemara says the full, truest, furthest, complete tshuva is if the person finds himself in the exact same situation of where they fell, where they blemished, and in that very spot is where they do the tikkun and they fix the problem. That's when it's a complete tshuva. The Gemara says in the same place, let's say it was a forbidden relationship, they're in with the same person, they have the same opportunity, and they're in there, and yet they refrain from sinning. That means that the makom of the pagam, that's where, on the words of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, he says that where he speaks about various different sins. He says, for instance, certain sexual sins where the pagam is in the brain. The way the tikkun has to be through limud Torah. Why does it have to be through limud Torah? Because Torah, you're learning Torah in your brain, and that's why you're fixing the pagam in the brain. And he says also, like when you tear a rope, when a rope tears, you make a knot. Where do you make the knot? In the place of the tear. That's where you make a double knot. So that's the idea. In the place of the very blemish, that's where you emphasize the tikkun. So therefore, since the month of Av is the place of the blemish, that's the place of the destruction. So that's why in the month of Av is where meaning that's the place where there was a disconnect, and that's the place where the chitzainim hacked. We'll soon see about the hack. Who's the hacker? But we see the chitzainim hacked, and they hacked in the month of Av. And another thing happened, as we said before, a husband and wife separated. So therefore, the tikkun that happens through the Yudke, Bayoimahu Yiyeh, which is emphasized in the 15th of the month, has to happen in the month of Av, and it's fixing both things. It's fixing both that the connection between us and God is going to be permanent, as it says regarding the third Beis Hamikdash, Oyel Baal Yitzam Lanetzach. The Ohel, this is the tent that's going to be never going to be disassembled. Lanetzach, forever. It's always going to be, the connection is going to be forever. And also that there's no more Yenikas Achitzonim, is the powers of evil are shut down. And both these things are in the month of emphasized. Now, for a moment, let's digress over here. Who is the hacker? And why Dafka in the month of Av? What I'm sharing with you today is a bunch of thoughts and ideas from the Tzemach Tzedek in Sefer Or HaTorah, Parshas Veschanan, Chelik Vav. So he has a whole arichos, and it's just enormous, the amount of information that's there in connecting so many different ideas. I'm probably just doing a drop of the bucket of what's discussed over there. So one of the inyanim that he talks about over there is that the month of Av, he says, one of the significance of Av, the meaning of the word Av, in addition to father, the word Av comes from the word Bechor, or not comes from the word, but Av is related to Bechor. Where do we see that? The month of Nisan is called Chodesh HaAviv, the month of spring. The reason why, but it's called Aviv. What's Aviv? Aviv means the first ripening. Rashi says, it's the first, Av comes in, it's the first of the ripening of the fruits, of the produce. It's beginning to ripen, it's beginning to get finished. So Av means, and because it's the first, so it's related to Bechor, what's first. So the month of Av is related to firstborn. Now we know, we trace our history back, there's been a big conflict regarding the firstborn rights. Between Yaakov and Esav, Yaakov is the father, of course, of the Jewish people, and Esav is the father of Rome. Yaakov is the heir, Yaakov was born second, Esav was the Bechor. But we know that Yaakov later snatched the Bechorah away from Esav. And if he snatched it, he bought it. Yes, he was an opportunist, and he took advantage of a weak moment when Esav was hungry and tired, and he just needed a plate of lentil soup. But that was part of Yaakov's cunningness, that he was able to get it. But why would Yaakov take something that doesn't belong to him? If it really belongs to Esav, why did Yaakov cheat his brother? Good, he actually purchased it, but it's a little dishonest to catch someone at such a weak moment and take advantage of them. It doesn't seem right, especially for a man of truth and an ethical person like Yaakov. The answer is given is because in truth Yaakov was really the Bechor. And the reason is because Yaakov was the first to be formed. Rashi says that when you take a tube and you put two things into the tube, the one that goes in first, it's like an elevator. The one that goes in first in the elevator is going to be the last one to exit, unless there's a door on the other side. If you're both coming out from the same door, one who went in first, and then it's a person coming in afterwards, so it's a full elevator, they're going to go out first, and then the one who went in first is going to come out. And that's with a tube. You put two things in, put two stones in a tube, two pebbles, the one that went in last is going to go out first. So the same is with the actual transmission. When Yitzchak was creating in the conception, when Yaakov and Esav were conceived, so Yaakov was conceived first. And even though they're twins, but Yaakov, the beginning begins with Yaakov. But because he's first, and being that the womb is like a tube, so there's first Yaakov entered, but the exiting Esav went out first. So even though he's emerging first, that means on appearance he seems to be the Bechor, he's not the real deep. The one who's really originally first is really Yaakov. So Yaakov is really the Bechor. But Esav is more presented as the Bechor. So what? So because Yaakov was the Bechor, that's what gave Yaakov later rights also to the brachos, to all the blessings, including that he will rule over his brother Esau, which is the idea that the side of holiness, the side of Kedusha, will dominate over the side of the Klippa, of the unholy. But what does Yitzchak say then to Esau? That this is all conditioned as long as Yaakov is following the Torah. When Yaakov starts becoming shaky in his observance, then Yaakov loses that. Then Esau, you'll be powerful. The hands of Esau. In other words, what's going to be? You'll be able to reclaim your Bechorah. It's not stop. You'll be powerful. Okay, just because he's not doing Torah, what gives you the rights? When he is not doing his mission, then he's disconnecting from that initial intention where he was created first. God created him first because that was the ultimate intention in creation. But when he's not fulfilling that, then he's disconnecting from that. So then we're looking more about, in reality, what happened. Oh, Esav came out first. Esav is the Bechor. So then Esav retakes the Bechorah. Esav retaking the Bechorah means that's why, and what does he do? That's why he can dominate over Yaakov and destroy Yaakov's temple and send the Jewish people into exile. So the Romans, who are descendants of Esav, when do they claim the Bechor? In the month of Bechor. The month of Av, which is the month of Bechor, because Av means Bechor. And for that reason, they were able to Esav was able to gain dominance over Yaakov in the month of Dafka. However, what does this mean? It doesn't just mean Esav over Yaakov or Rome over the Jewish people. It means the general forces of the chitzonim, of the external, of the darkness, gain mastery over the pnimius, over the inner light, over the godly and the holy in the world. That's the vulnerability that Hashem made himself vulnerable in creation. That even Hashem himself allows for himself to be, so to speak, abused by that which is unholy, which he himself creates, which is just a mystery beyond mysteries. But that's the way it is. However, this dominance is only the first 9 days of the month of Av. It's a 9-day dominance, and afterwards they lose power. That's why till Tisha B'Av they can rule and break and destroy. Once Tisha B'Av, and then we get to the 10th, over. The reason for that, so the Tzemach Tzedek says something interesting. I don't really fully grasp the idea, but there's something like this. He says in Klippa, in Kedusha and holiness, the power is 10. Like we know that when God reveals himself, he reveals himself through 10 spheros. 10 spheros are from Chachma till Malchus. These are the 10 spheros. In Klippa, it's 11. As it says, it's already discussed in Kabbalah many times that Klippa, they have the power. That's why we bring 11 different spices to weaken, to overpower the powers of the unholy. The Zohar speaks of 11 kisrin de misavusa, 11 powers of Klippa. In Kedusha, it's, as we said earlier, it's 10, and the Zohar makes an interesting emphasis. 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. By the way, when 9/11 happened, it was an interesting thing that this whole eruption, a powerful force of evil in this world, demonstrated on 9/11. And the Zohar says holiness is 10, not 9, not 11. Doesn't mean that there's nothing holy that's 9, and doesn't mean that there's nothing holy that's 11. Quite on the contrary, 9 and 11 are very powerful levels in holiness, because 9 and 11 are the powers that actually, when you transform Klippa into Kedusha, then that's associated with the numbers 9 and 11. But that's not holiness as holiness originates. The originality of holiness is 10, not 9, and not 11. Now, let's understand, but what are the 11 powers of Klippa? We said earlier, remember, we said there is Yud K and there is Vav K. Yud K is Gematria 15. Vav K is a weaker union, Vav K, the latter, the Vav and the Hey. And we said, remember, that the Vav and the Hey are hackable. And the Vav and the Hey is an open circuit. It could be breached. It's not protected that well. And that's where, now, remember what we said earlier, Klipa doesn't have any own power. Klipa's entire strength and its entire energy is only what it steals from holiness. So that comes out that the entire powers of Klipa are breaking into the Vav K. Vav K is 11. That's what gives the Klipa a power. That's what is the source of power for the 11 crowns of unholiness. What do they do, the 11 crowns of unholiness? They cause that Kedusha should be diminished. And what's Kedusha? 10. How do they diminish Kedusha? They turn it into 9. And that's the idea of the 9 days. That Kedusha is diminished to 9. Hey, what happened to 10? Malchus, which is the 10th, got separated. They caused Malchus to break away. They pull the Shekhinah into Galus. It remains 9 spherot, 9 spheres without the 10th. The 10th is Malchus, and Malchus is dragged into the Klipa. So what are you left with? Only 9. And that means the whole power of holiness is weakened, and that's why in those 9 days, there is a power for the other side, for Klipa. What happens to Malchus, as we said before? She's driven away. She's driven into exile, like the Jewish people were driven into exile. This idea that Malchus is driven into exile is what we mention on Tisha B'Av. In the first word that we open up the prayer, the unique experience of Tisha B'Av, we all know, is with Eicha. What does Eicha mean? Eicha comes from 2 words, Koi. Is and simply Koi means where is Ko? Where is Koi? Chav Hey Koi A. From the word Aye, where is she? Where is Koi? Koi is Malchus. As it's explained in many places, when it says Ko Amar Hashem, Zeh is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zeh is a word indicative of a HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it says Moshe Rabbeinu was misnabeh. When Moshe said Nevuah, his Nevuah was with Zeh. His Nevuah was higher than Malchus. All the other Nevi'im were misnabeh b'koi, with Ko. Because Malchus is already just an imitate. I don't want to say imitation. It's already a translation of godliness, as opposed to pure divinity on the higher level. B'tzalmeinu kidmuseinu is the whole discussion on that. I'm not going to get right now into it. But Malchus is called Koi. When Malchus is connected, so there's a pasuk that says V'amartem koi l'choi. We sing it like Ba'im, we know, Amartem koi l'choi. But there's a pasuk, we say it in V'yitam l'chamatz Shabbos, V'amartem koi l'choi. Connecting ko l'chai. Chai is yesod, is the upper masculine spheres. When you connect chai to koi, that's the yichud of Ze'er and Malchus. If there's a separation, that's I koi. Where is koi? And then also, there's a deeper meaning also. I is 11. What happened to koi, to Malchus? She got pulled into the powers of 11, which is the powers of unholy. They're trapping Malchus. This is hinted to in the first breach, the first problem of problems started with the sin of Adam Arishon in Gan Eden. And the pasuk over there says he banished, as a consequence of the sin, Vayigaresh es ha'adam. Hashem banished Adam Arishon. So the banishment of Adam is the beginning of the banishment of the Shekhinah. Later, it's the driving the Jewish people out of Eretz Yisroel. It's just a continuation of Hashem banishing Adam from Gan Eden. Vayigaresh es, the word es that Tzemach Tzedek says, I think he brings it from the Zohar, but I didn't check the Zohar up. But Vayigaresh es, he says, is Tisha of. Usually we say Tisha B'Av, but it's actually the 9th of. So es is Tisha of. The 9th of, that's when it happened. Vayigaresh es Adam, that Hashem drives Adam Arishon out. And what did God say to Adam? Ayeka, which is the same words as Eicha. The Ayeka that Hashem said is, Hashem is lamenting Eicha. Hashem says already Eicha on this disconnect that happens, which again, the power of 11, again, this is the source of Esav's 11 powers, where Esav has power in the month of Dafka, as we said earlier, to cause this separation of Aikoi, which, as we said earlier, from the Vavke, which is 11, it's not a constant unity. There can be a separation. And there can be a Nikas Achitzai. That's only till the 9th of Av. But as we said earlier, since Yaakov is truly and really the Bechor, so Yaakov's comeback and the Tikkun is not in a different month. Because again, Esav's power is because he's claiming firstborn rights. He's first. When Yaakov is not connecting to his source of sources, Esav can claim on the visible level that he's first because he appeared first on the stage. Therefore, he has a power to destroy Yaakov and to bring about the Golus and bring about this whole separation. Yaakov's comeback is in the very month of Av because Yaakov really is the Bechor. And the month of Av, as we said earlier, Av is Bechor, the power of firstborn. So Yaakov reclaims his firstborn in the month of Av on the 15th, which the 15th replaces the 11 with number 15, the Vav K with a Yud K, and the Maila of Yud K is never separated. Never separated. The two of them can never, Oyel Bal Yitzam, the two are always joined together. There cannot be a breach in the separation. So it's a tikkun on that, and therefore we know that this geula, the geula that's related to the 15th of Av, is going to be a permanent geula. It will never, ever, ever chas v'sholem be broken. And as we said before, on this level, there's no more yanikas achitzonim. There's no more deriving of energy for the klipa, for the unholy. This will also explain this is the explanation of the moon being as bright as the sun. Because the Vav K rises to the level of Yud K. It's the same light like the sun. That's why it says one of the remuzim, one of the hints to in the Torah for the Churban Beis Hamikdash, for the destruction and for Tisha B'Av and so on and so forth, is when Yaakov is struggling again with the Malach of Esav. Same story, Yaakov and Esav. So it says that he Vayiga b'kaf Yerecha, that the Malach hit him in the thigh. So we know that the body, the physical body, is a reflection of the spiritual sphirot and attributes. The anatomy of the body is derived from the spiritual anatomy above. The right hand is chesed, the left hand is gevura, the center of the body is teferes, the torso. The right leg is netzach, the left leg is hod. When it says the malach hit Yaakov, it says he hit him on the left leg. It's machlokes in the Gemara, which bekaf yerecha, but say it's the left leg, which was primarily either I think he, according to one opinion, he damaged him on both legs or only on the left. What's the left leg? The left leg is hod. That's why we know that if you take the word hoid and you rearrange the letters, you get the word daveh. In the Megillah of Echa, we say daveh means an ache, a pain. V'hoidi nehepach lamashches, it says, my hod, my glory, was turned over to be destroyed. We say, al zeh hayad daveh libeinu. On this my heart is aching. Daveh is the word hoid. We also know the Zohar says that the main Golus is the 1,000 years that correspond to Hod. The 7,000 years of the world, each 1,000 years correspond to a different sphere. So the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and the beginning of the Golus happened in the destruction of Beis Hamikdash happened 172 years before the end of the Netzach period, before the end of the 4th millennium. It was very close to the beginning of the 5th millennium, which is the 1,000 years of Hod. But why is Hod? Because the pasuk says Kol Hayoim Daveh, the entire day of aching. So that's 1,000 years of suffering. Should have only been 1,000 years. Now we're creeping up on 2,000 years. But the main injury was in Hod. Now the months of the year. So Nisan is Chesed. That's why God reveals us Chesed. Iyar is Gevura. We find that in many ways in the month of Iyar is Midas Hadin. That's when you had the students of Rabbi Akiva dying, and we had the whole month of Iyar, the days of Sphira, which we know is associated with dinim, with judgments. Sivan is Tiferes. That's why we receive the Torah, which is Tiferes. Tiferes is also Emes, Torah's Emes. Tammuz is Netzach, and Av is Hod. So the Malach of Esav, we said before, Esav has power over Yaakov, right? That's the whole destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. When does Esav exercise his power? In the month of Av, because that's where he gives him the injury. But what does it say immediately after the injury? Vayizrach loy hashemesh, the sun appeared to him. The sun reveals itself, and the sun healed Yaakov. It says, Vayava Yaakov shalom ir Shechem. Yaakov came in peace to the city of Shechem. So Yaakov was completely healed from the injury. What is the meaning of Vayizrach loy hashemesh? Is that even though Yaakov, who are Katan, Yaakov is the smaller one. Yaakov is compared to the moon. Like the moon is the Katan, the small. There's a Chloi Hashemesh, is that the moon became like the light of the sun. That's what the Tzemach Tzedek says. The moon, this is the Tikkun that happens already on Tisha B'Av, is already the full-fledged Tikkun of the injury that happens. On this day will be Yudke. Okay, I'm going to stop now, even though this is maybe a third of what I wanted to say tonight, a lot more. Maybe we'll do another segment of this tomorrow night on Tu B'Av itself. I can't promise, but I would like to. So the main thing is that the 15th of Av already should be the full Tikkun of all, should be the Tikkun of all the Tikkunim, and everything should be already completed. Should there be the full, complete union between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Knesset Yisroel. All injury should be healed. We should experience the V'hoya Oir Halavana Ka'oir Achama V'yaymahu Yiyeh in its full glory.